Just to give you a little backdrop, let me just tell you how this whole marriage process would have worked in ancient Israel. It was a three-phase process that went on. First, there was the engagement, which probably happened at a very young age. Marriage was serious business, so it wasn't just left to fancy. Parents or even professional matchmakers in that day who would kind of have a pool of people to pick from, helped set up who was going to end up with who for life. And so this was probably done at a very young point in their life. The marriage probably came about at this point because Mary had finally reached an age where she could be married. And so if you've seen the nativity story, I thought they did that quite well. She wasn't, kind of being pulled out of childhood into marriage, whether she was ready or not. But anyway, there she was, this young woman ready to be married. And so this process would have started way back in their childhood, this going on. Secondly became the betrothal, and they mentioned that quite well too. The betrothal was by law 1 year. And when it looked like it was, they were ready to get married, you just back time it 1 year, and then they were legally married in every way, except for the idea of being together and having children. There was that. And what happened before the betrothal year started, both parties had to agree to it. So, Mary, that was kind of good too. They showed Mary, she could have backed out of that at that point if she wanted to. So the betrothal takes a year, and it is a legal binding contract between people. As a matter of fact, in the time, if Joseph, say, would have died in that betrothal year, Mary would have been known by the term a virgin widow. She hadn't, had consummated a marriage, but yet she was still legally married, so she would have been a widow in that sense. Then thirdly, of course, then there was the marriage proper where they would come together and be in marriage as we know it. So I want you to put yourself in the mind of Joseph for a minute. Consider this. There you are. All your life you've been working at developing your skill as a carpenter, starting a business, all in mind that there was this young girl, and when she reached age, you were going to get married and the whole family thing was going to start. You've been working towards this your entire life. And you agree with this Mary because you've watched her grow up in the same village. Man, she's been virtuous. She's been a person of integrity even when she was a child. Man, you can't wait until you can start a life with this person. And you're sure she's an honorable person. You yourself are very devout, very religious. So you can't wait till life really starts in earnest with this person all through your life. And then finally it's the year of the betrothal, and the betrothal takes place, and you're into this period of that year. Not long to go now, not long to go. And then this woman you thought was just the cat's meow, that's a biblical term as well, she comes up pregnant. Can you imagine what this guy felt like? Can you imagine the sense of betrayal at first? And then the sense of confusion because, wow, she was such a person of integrity. What's going on? What's happening here? And then hear this story. Here's the premise I'm going at. Here is God entering someone's world. This just isn't a bad situation. This is how God enters someone's world, and his world is turned upside down. It is totally turned upside down. The pain, the confusion, all of this that must have happened to this man. And for Mary, we know it wasn't much better, all that she went through. All of this upside down. See, the premise is this. If we want to know what it looks like when God really enters a life, why not refer to when we know he really entered the world? And these are the people who played a part in the story. So their story must be your story. What happens in their life, maybe not in all the little details, but in the dynamics of it, should be your story and my story. So here we are. God enters a world and he literally turns it upside down. Like, what's going on? Why did God do that? Why would God do that? Especially if we say it's not only with Joseph and with Mary, but with everyone, when God enters their world in a very, very real way. Why does it have to be that way? Well, let me just step back a bit and just be a bit logical and philosophical for a minute and think of who you are and who I am. We're temporal. We live in the day-to-day. We make our plans, and our plans reflect that we live in the day-to-day. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Well, I don't know. The best I can do is plan accordingly and do my best. But most of my time is tied up in the immediate. I'm either thinking of this day or what I've got to get done in the next week, the next month. And if I really think I'm looking forward, I might make a 5-year plan or a vague plan for the life. But it's very temporal. And on top of that, we are limited because, like I said, we do not see that far, we don't understand everything that's going on. We have our little part of the picture, and that's what we go on. And if being limited and temporal isn't enough, we're also flawed. Yes, that's right. We're flawed. Every one of us, human nature is flawed. You do not, and I do not understand perfectly. I may know a few things, but I do not understand perfectly. And even what I understand, I don't have the perfect wisdom to decipher that. I don't have perfect vision into the future. I'm extremely imperfect. And this is the little world that I live in. This is the little process of planning I make. Well, then let's think that's me, but Christianity is all about God entering your world. Well, what's God like? Well, one, he's not temporal, he's infinite. God doesn't only see the past and the future, he sees it all at the same time. He sees it as one big package, not limited by time. Not only does he see it all, he understands it all. And he doesn't just understand it, he understands it perfectly. And he doesn't just understand it perfectly, he understands it from a state of holiness. All these things that I don't have. All these things you don't have. I'm limited, he's infinite. I'm imperfect, he's perfect. He sees things one way, I see things the other way. So what would we expect if God were to really enter your world? I mean, tangibly, in the flesh. At one time it was his own flesh, now it's in your flesh. To enter my world, what do I expect to happen? Everything to run the same way? Everything maybe just be slightly improved? No. He's everything I'm not, out to the point of extreme. My life will be turned upside down. The way I think of things will be turned upside down. The things I desired will be turned upside down. My morality will be turned upside down. My sense of virtue will be turned upside down. My vision of the future will be turned upside down. And greatest of all, my destiny will be turned upside down. Because quite frankly, I was going down. But because God turns it upside down, now I can be going up. But I have to be turned upside down in order to go up. That's what it takes when an infinite God comes in. It's inevitable. How could it be anything else but to turn you upside down when God comes into your life? Problem is, getting turned upside down is not a very pleasant experience. Sometimes, most of the time. Getting turned upside down can be confusing. Like Joseph, we get to be asking, God, why is this happening? I was a good person. I was doing good stuff. I was planning well. Why is this happening? Does make no sense to me. Have you ever been there? If you haven't, then there's still another level you have to go with God. He hasn't entered your life to the tangible extent he can. You will be turned upside down. You will find points of confusion. You may even find yourself in valleys of doubt. You will definitely be on your way to becoming something else. There's where Joseph was. So let's pop back into his situation. We know this was a situation. Man, the sense of betrayal. I mean, you can just imagine the gut-wrenching tragedy this must have seemed like at first. But God doesn't leave him there. As he's working through this, God does appear. He comes to him again in a tangible way and starts explaining the promise. As a matter of fact, he goes on, here he is, an average Joe with a well-planned life for his time, skilled laborer, with a well-planned thing. If Joseph's life would have gone according to Joseph, we wouldn't be here today. We would have no reason, because the messianic promise, Christ, the Messiah, came through this crazy situation. And so Joseph's little life, his little picture, blew up into this thing that is so huge that you and I, 2,000 years later, halfway around the world, still know him by his first name. Pretty amazing stuff, isn't it? That's what God had planned for this man. But he had to get turned upside down before he could get there. We can read that. The rest of Matthew goes into what that's all about. And you can read that for yourself. I know you've heard the story several times. I just want to point something out to you. There is Joseph. He feels the betrayal. He feels the pain. He's in that state. Then an angel comes to him, tells him what it's really all about. And at that moment, when there's a revelation, Joseph has a choice to make. And it's the moment of truth for him. He has a choice to make. He can either stay in the pain or start living the promise. He can stay in the pain and the past, or he can start living the promise. Wow, there's a choice. And you know what? It comes to all of us. There is a moment of truth in every life. When I was thinking about this, where I really went back to was Pastor Tim's church down at City View. And it was saying the first service is great. This year we raised, all of us involved in this together, the most money for families ever. $14,000, I think it was this year. An enormous amount. A lot of people are going to get fed over the Christmas season because of this. But that's only a small little tip of the iceberg in his ministry. His core ministry is this thing called a SWAT team. And no, they don't give people rifles to go out and try their marksmanship. It's an acronym. And I have to say it was very clever, and I forget exactly what it stands for, but it's called SWAT. Basically what it is they get those men, it's geared towards those men in that rough area town who they've completely burned their lives down. They've spiraled out of control, and they know it. So the whole idea of this ministry is they have a house. They take in what men are good candidates in this. They take them through a training program and a religious training program, a spiritual program. So when they come out the other side, guess what? Their lives are turned around. As they're turned around, all of this stuff that they've gone through now, they give them another direction through Christ and through some practical training, and they've had wonderful success with it. As a matter of fact, 2 of their ministers have come through that SWAT training, and it's amazing. One was a gangbanger with everything that goes along with that, the drugs and the violence and everything, and another fellow, his life wasn't really any better. But it came through. But when these men hit that point and they come into this training program, you know what they first get when they get in? More pain. More pain. Because when they're coming into, you know what they have to do? Now they have to admit or acknowledge, really, where they are in life and what they are. It has to start there for them, that their accountability for what got them there in the first place, all the habits and everything that they lived, the decisions they made, and now they have to own them. They have to own up to them before they can start changing. That's just the way it is. But if they go through that pain, if they allow their lives to get turned upside down, now those lives that were going down are now going up. But it takes getting turned upside down in a very, very real way. What gets turned upside down for them? How they value, how they see the world, how they live life, their very natures, what they do with their habits, what they do with their addictions, what they use to make their choices, their filters, all of that stuff gets turned upside down, and it becomes what Christ is instead of what they were. And they will tell you quite openly how they've been moved. But every one of those men has to do the same thing Joseph did. Whole different story, whole different person, same thing. A moment of truth. You can either live in the past, live in the pain, or live into the promise. And for them, some of them, it's been some amazing stuff that's gone on. Same dynamic. You know, as I was doing this part of the message, the idea God enters your world and turns it upside down, and shared these dramatic stories a little bit. There's Alex and the Schubert girls and everything in there. And I'm saying, you know what? There's a danger for you people. And a lot of you that are sitting in here, a danger. You've been in church enough to be inoculated. That there's nothing super dramatic. You know, you weren't selling drugs on the street. You weren't that visibly corrupted. But you know what? According to God's word, you're every bit as sinful as those people are, if we want to use that word. We're every bit in the same nature as they are. Every bit is able to be selfish. It just doesn't show so dramatically in our lives. You know what that means? We too must be turned upside down. Even if you sat in a church pew all your life, still have to be turned upside down. Joseph was one of the most Jew of Jews men, very devout. That's why God chose him. And even his life had to be turned upside down. It has to be turned around. And then God starts working in a tangible way in our life. Starts working. Wow, what a concept when we think of where we are in the Western church, in our culture. So many places you can go and say, you know, the idea of, here, believe in God and your life is going to be better. And we just start there. Maybe that's not where it starts at all. Maybe that's where it never started. Some lessons, some truths to take from Joseph in his story. First is this, if we even get this idea across. For God to really be working tangibly, I'm talking at the level of transformation in a person's life, your life must be turned upside down. Maybe not in every circumstance, but the way you view things, what you think is good and what you think is bad, what you ignore in yourself and what you don't ignore, what can be grown in there and what needs to go away, all gets turned upside down. And it's a process. It does. You look at Joseph's life. It just didn't get turned upside down once. It continued. Off to Egypt, back from Egypt. Different things that went on. Life remained challenging along the way. It was upside down, but the promise was unfolding as he went along. There will be seasons of pain. There will be seasons of confusion. If you are trying to understand the God who created the universe from a holy nature, believe me, if you don't think you're going through confusion, you're deluding yourself. There will be times of confusion. There should be times of confusion. You know, it's a good thing we sit here and there should be times where you're simply given food for thought. But you know when you and I will probably do the most growth is we take this and digest it a little bit. And then our faith is challenged. Somebody comes and say, oh yeah, you're a Christian. Well, what about this? And you don't have an answer. And man, do you wrestle with that question. Or circumstances happen in your life like Joseph. Why did this happen? Why did I end up sick? Why did this person die? Why did this bad thing happen? I don't know why. I'm confused. I'm angry. And then you're at a moment of truth. You either stay in the pain or start living in the promise. You wrestle with things. And that's really the third thing to learn from his life. If we could get this into the DNA, the fabric of our Christianity in our church, there's a time for this type of thing. There's a time to share a little bit, a time to assimilate a little bit of information, ponder it, all of that. But this isn't where you grow. This is just food for thought. You grow when you struggle through your own faith. You need to struggle to the answers. Use good food for thought, but you need to struggle through it. You have to be your own Joseph in this situation. So expecting a life to get turned around, if you want to see God really there, seasons of confusion, or at least a challenge to work through, the idea of wrestling with the truth, all of these things. On the other end of it is eternity. On the other end of this is the promise. On the other end of this is you growing further, more profound in your relationship with Christ, more Christ-like, turned into something beyond what you are right now, transformative. But these things have to happen. So the question really to all this, there's no question in history, everything proves there was a Christ who entered the world. There was a Joseph who went through all of that stuff that we saw. There was a Mary who went through that stuff, all of that, and the promise fulfilled. But they had to wrestle through all these things in order to hit the promise, to get to the promise. Do you want God's promise in your life? Do you want to become what he has waiting for you? Great. Hopefully we catch that vision of things. But if we want to get there, or do you want it enough? Are you willing? Because forget it without this. Are you willing to let him turn you upside down to do it? You're going down. He turns you upside down. Now you're going up with all that implies. Are we willing? Are we willing?